What's up, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Kennahan. We're back after a little break we took for about a week, but now we're back to recap Washington's wild game against the Atlanta Falcons, where the Washington Commanders have clinched a playoff spot for the first time since 2020 with a 30-24 win on Sunday Night Football in overtime against Atlanta. It was a crazy game. I was going home, so I was in the airport, running around the airport watching this game. So it was definitely pretty crazy. And watching it back this morning, it was definitely a lot to take away from this. We'll start with Washington, of course, the big story being they clinch a playoff spot. This is the fourth time in my life Washington's clinched a playoff spot, and the first time actually for this show, which is pretty cool too. So the first time in this show's history, the Washington Commanders are in the playoffs. They're 11-5 overall with the 30-24 win against the Falcons. It is the first time Washington has an 11-win season since 1991, the last season where they won a Super Bowl. This was the fifth game-winning drive in the fourth quarter in overtime for Mr. Jayden Daniels, the man of the city right now, Jayden Daniels, who has just been on an absolute tear the last few weeks. And I mean, he's been able to deliver in the clutch. We'll get more into it, but he's been able to deliver in the clutch time after time after again. And he's a rookie. He's still a rookie, and it does not look like it at all. He's playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. This is his fifth game-winning drive in his career already. He was able to put together. Washington was able to put together a 12-play. Let me bring it up. 12-play, I believe, 70-yard drive that took over 7 minutes in overtime after winning the coin toss, which was massive. The vibes going into this game were through the roof. This was flexed to primetime because of the stakes that it had on the NFC playoff picture, and it really delivered. Washington was, we'll get into it, but Washington was down early on. They were able to come back and led by pretty much number 5, who kind of did it all. The Washington Commanders are in the playoffs. Jayden Daniels in the fourth quarter and overtime this season. I mentioned how he has been so clutch time and time again. He did it again. Jayden Daniels ranks second in EPA per play, so in efficiency per play, second in completion percentage over expected. This is a rookie doing this. He's putting up better numbers in the clutch than guys like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow this season, and Lamar, who are all having great seasons. This is spectacular stuff from Jayden Daniels that we are seeing, and you can make the case this is probably better than, I know the numbers, especially the passing numbers, don't exactly show it, but this could be a better rookie season than what CJ Stroud had last year, especially because of what Jayden Daniels has been able to do on the ground, which we'll get into in a little bit. But overall, another classic game for the Washington Commanders, another one-possession victory this season. We look at the last few games for Washington, a one-possession victory over Atlanta, one-possession victory over Philadelphia, and a one-possession victory over New Orleans. So that's each of the last 3 games have come down to the wire for the Washington Commanders, and Jayden Daniels has been able to deliver in every single one of them. I know the Saints one was kind of more the defensive thing, but still, he put up enough points on offense to win that game. So it's great stuff from Daniels, great stuff from this offense, especially an offense let's just dive right into it. An offense that has been kind of a roller coaster throughout this game. Going into it without Andrew Wiley, without De'Ami Brown, without Noah Brown, without some of the other targets for Jayden Daniels as well for those wide receivers. And throughout this game, I mean, Terry McLaurin, 1 catch for 5 yards, and that's it on 7 targets. You would think this passing game would just be dead. But Jayden Daniels, 24 of 36, 227 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air. He threw an interception early on as well. But a passer rating of 100.1. He took 5 sacks. In this passing game was still great with Terry McLaurin struggling against A.J. Terrell, who had one hell of a game. And then without guys like De'Ami Brown and Noah Brown in that receiver room to help ease the pressure off of guys like Terry McLaurin. A guy I want to shout out who has been stellar the last couple of weeks, Olamide Zaccheaus, OZ, who has been just incredible. 8 catches for 85 yards and a touchdown coming off of a 2-touchdown performance last week against Philadelphia. This guy is sure hands. He's got consistent hands. He's been a reliable target with Noah Brown out for the Washington Commanders, and is a guy that Jayden Daniels can really trust, and a guy who has stepped up in the absence of Noah Brown to kind of keep on elevating this offense into making sure they maintain one of the top passing attacks in the league right now. So it was great from the receiving room, as well as Zach Ertz, 6 catches for 72 yards, the game-winning touchdown in overtime. He had another one as well, so a 2-touchdown performance for Zach Ertz, a guy many people thought, hey, does he have any juice left in him? I mean, both Ertz and Zacchaeus, both of them were former free agents this last offseason. Both of them were brought in by this new regime. People were like, I don't know how much they have left. Zacchaeus, maybe he's like a wide receiver 3 or 4. I mean, he's been the wide receiver 1 for Washington the last couple of weeks. So that is, I mean, in terms of production. So like that is huge and a gem of a find from Adam Peters and company. And of course, Zacchaeus going against his former 2 teams, Philadelphia last week, Atlanta this week, the first 2 teams he was on in the NFL before coming to Washington. So you could say it's been a revenge game each of the last 2 weeks for Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus has delivered in a lot of ways possible. So loved what I saw from Alameda Zacchaeus. Ertz, of course, 6 catches for 72 yards. It's good to see him getting some more success after he's kind of battled a concussion coming into this game, or coming into, I believe, maybe last week against Philly. But he's been battling some injuries recently, so it's good to see him succeed. And then Jamison Crowder, 3 catches for 25. John Bates had a catch for 14. Chris Rodriguez, a catch for 12. A guy that is not on this list in terms of targets or receptions is Luke McCaffrey, who I want to talk about a little bit, because McCaffrey has been a guy that many fans wanted maybe him to step up and have a bigger role in this offense once Noah Brown went down, and especially now with De'Ami Brown down. But, I mean, Bryson Tremaine was getting snaps, guys. Bryson Tremaine was elevated off the practice squad, and he was getting snaps over a guy like Luke McCaffrey. So you can maybe say this was probably the biggest miss, or it's early, especially for a guy like McCaffrey who was drafted in the 3rd round. But so far, it's been hard for him to see time on the field if it's not on special teams, which on special teams, McCaffrey has done an incredible job receiving kicks, especially kickoffs the last couple of weeks. He's been one of the best returners in football the last couple of weeks. He's consistently putting the ball past the 25-yard line, which is awesome for this Washington Commanders offense. Gets them some good field position early. He has great vision in the return game as well. So I've loved what I've seen from him out of the return game, but offensively, he's still struggling to get snaps, which is not great to see from your former 3rd round pick. I know it was the last pick in the 3rd round, and it was early. It still is kind of early, but in a receiver room that has really struggled to have a second guy beyond Terry McLaurin, and when Terry doesn't have a good game beyond like this game where Zacchaeus had 8 catches for 85 and a touchdown, the no one has really emerged beyond Terry to be a consistent production, no one has emerged to show consistent production since, if it's not Terry. So that is what has happened in the past game. Let's flip to the run game now. I mean, guys, Jayden Daniels. The guy is special. 16 carries for 127 yards, averaging almost 8 yards per scramble per carry. He also had multiple scrambles to keep multiple drives alive in this one. This team was down 17-7 at the half, and Jayden Daniels there's something about him, and like I've mentioned this on previous podcasts, but the game never feels out of hand when Jayden Daniels has the football and he's playing well. Because, I mean, especially now after this one, there's something about Jayden who, I mean, he said it himself in his post-game interview, I believe, with Scott Van Pelt. He's just so poised at all times. He never gets, like, too excited, or like his emotions. He tries to keep his emotions kind of stable throughout the entire game. You don't want to get it too high or too low, and it could get out of hand. So, I mean, Jayden has been what Washington fans have been looking for a long, long time. So it's cool to see Jayden This was his best rushing game by far so far in the NFL. It really looked like LSU Jayden Daniels out there. The Falcons were giving him alleyways to step up in the pocket and get to the outside, get to the sidelines. Multiple receivers were throwing blocks out there and were aware of when Jayden Daniels was scrambling, which was good. You love to see it from a run game, which really struggled beyond Jayden Daniels running the football. Brian Robinson had 13 carries for 60 yards, which looks good, but I believe like half of those yards came on one drive. So it looked for a good majority of it that he was really struggling. Chris Rodriguez came in as kind of a change of pace back on one drive, 5 carries for 16 yards and a touchdown. Great stuff from a former 6th-round pick in the Ron Rivera regime back in 2022, I believe, or yeah, 2022, I think. So I mean, Chris Rodriguez has kind of found himself in a role. 2023 6th-round pick. I mean, in his second season in the league, he's kind of found himself in a little bit of a role when Austin Eckler is down for the Washington Commanders, which you love to see from the former late day 3 pick. Zacchaeus had a carry and McNichols had a carry as well in this one. But the run game overall struggled beyond Jayden, but you don't really need that at the end when Jayden is averaging 8 yards per carry. He's scrambling, he sees the field super well, and he's beating guys like Ebiketie and Matthew Judon to the edge of the sideline. And I mean, beating them upfield, a 25-yard carry on a 2nd down, I believe, or a 3rd down. Jayden as a rusher is special, and even though he may not have, or he may not be showing that top speed that a guy like Prime Lamar had or still has, you could say, but he's just so smart as a runner. He was taking some hits, but at the end of the day, like the game was on the line. All right, you don't take the hits that are unnecessary for reasons like this. So you can take the hits when the game is on the line, and you can pick up that extra yardage or two in overtime, 2nd and goal, or I believe maybe it was 1st and goal when Jayden on a keeper, he scrambled out and was going to go to the end zone. He got hit probably 3 times on that play, still stretching out, trying to get the ball across the goal line. He ended up being short, but it just shows the fight that he has. He's not scared of contact, and even the hits he was taking, it wasn't like the cartoonish hits that he was taking in the kind of mental faults that Jayden had at LSU when he was a runner. It wasn't those where Jayden goes flying 10 yards down the field for some reason hits. It was just some big hits that, I mean, if you're going to win games like this, you got to take those hits. So that's kind of my thoughts on Jayden taking hits, which really shouldn't be that big of a conversation in this one. Still, it was a great performance from this offense down the stretch. One of the best 3rd down teams in the league. Does it again on 3rd down. It felt like for a good majority of this game, Washington should have been down by more than what they were, and we'll get into Penix's kind of inaccuracies later on. But Washington was 6 of 13 on 3rd down, 3 of 3 on 4th down. This season, on 4th down, the Washington Commanders have averaged, I believe, or not averaged, that I believe it's plus 49 point something EPA, total EPA on just 4th down. So EPA, expected points added, basically shows how many of your total points are going to be added because of going for it and converting it on 4th down, and the results that occur on 4th down. But you talk about the touchdown, a crazy throw from Jayden Daniels' sidearm, moving the opposite direction to Olamide Zacchaeus. And then down the stretch, a couple of other 4th downs where this team was able to convert big conversions as well to keep the game alive. I mean, it was massive. It was massive for this Washington team. One of the best 4th down teams we have seen in a long time, and not just in Washington history, but I would say in NFL history. The 4th down run that Washington is on is insane right now. So great stuff from this Washington offense. One thing I will mention before we wrap things up and switch sides of the ball, the penalties. All right, guys, we got to talk about these penalties. 13 penalties for the Washington Commanders in this one for 108 yards, for only 4 penalties for the Atlanta Falcons for 25. 13 penalties. Most of those came on offense for Washington. this is what I meant by Washington was just beating themselves up in that first half, and especially down the stretch as well. It made it even harder for them to score. They still did, and they still ended up winning this game, but just the consistent holding penalties and the false starts on the Washington Commanders. I mean, there was a false start on the very first play of the overtime period for the Washington Commanders. Like, you cannot have that happen, or a legal shift. I remember there was a 5-yard penalty, but you cannot have that happen in clutch moments like this. Now Washington gets away with it now, and I mean, you end up winning this game because of your quarterback. But ultimately, when you go up into the playoffs against teams like Philly, teams like LA, Detroit, potentially, if Washington were to move on, you cannot have these costly penalties, accounting for over 100 yards in this one. The penalties have been a story for Washington, not only in this game, but I believe in the Philly game as well. Yeah, 6 penalties for 93 yards in the Philly game. Most of those coming on a pass interference, I believe. But these penalty yards are racking up for Washington in the last few weeks. Washington's going to need to play cleaner. I know in this one you can blame the offensive line. You had Trent Scott out there. You had Michael Dieter out there. Tyler Biadasz and Cornelius Lucas both were injured during the game. Um, Biadasz was seen, I believe, with a walking boot in the locker room. Don't really know his status moving forward. Would be a massive loss for the Washington Commanders. We saw what happened in the Saints game when Biadasz was not out there. Washington really struggled to communicate on the offensive line. The run game really struggled to get going. And in this one, same thing really happened. Biadasz was out there. He got injured pulling to go block for a big play. I believe it was a Jayden Daniels scramble, but for a big play. Like, the guy is mobile. He can go out there and opens up a lot more left to right stuff and more the outside zone that Washington runs. So I think losing Biadasz would be massive. Both, I mean, he's just a huge part of this offensive line. He's been one of the best centers in football this season. It'd be a massive loss, and hopefully he's able to recover quickly. As for a guy like Cornelius Lucas, who was playing right tackle today because Andrew Wiley was out with an injury, I mean, and also the depth on this offensive line is not good. Beyond Lucas, and Lucas even then is kind of inconsistent at times. I don't trust a guy like Trent Scott on the outside. Chris Paul, if he ends up playing at some point because of all these injuries, I don't really trust him right now because he hasn't really played in a while. Um, and he hasn't really shown that he can be consistent as well. And going up against some of these top pass rushers next week and the week after, whoever it be against Philadelphia or someone else, Washington is going to need these tackles to be healthy. They're going to need Wiley to be healthy. They're going to need Cornelius Lucas to be that rotation guy. Brandon Coleman has got to play better. There's some ups and downs with Coleman today, but like it's got to be more consistent from him. I know he's a rookie, but there's a lot of things that need to improve for this Washington team up front on the offensive line. So let's flip sides of the ball. With that being said, to the defensive side, similar to the offense, it was up and down. It was not a good first half. 17 points allowed for this Washington defense, and then they only allowed 7 the rest of the way. Quan Martin, great read on Michael Penix to get an interception early on. It was an inaccurate ball from Penix, but Martin was already kind of shading over to that side and giving some safety help. So it was a great read from Quan Martin to get that interception on Penix. Penix's inconsistent accuracy, I'll read his stat line right now, but Penix's inconsistent accuracy was 19 of 35 for 223 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Was definitely noticeable, especially on throws towards the sideline. You talk about that interception to Quan Martin. He was kind of throwing a ball. You could say maybe the receiver wasn't there, the timing was off, but his accuracy towards the sideline definitely struggled and kept Washington in this game. There was multiple chances. I think Penix just missed 3 touchdowns. You talk about the one-on-one with Bijan Robinson against Quan Martin. Bijan beats Quan, and it's a touchdown if Penix lays it up on like a vertical route to Bijan, but Penix just misses him. Multiple other chances to Drake London that Penix just missed. Now down the stretch, it was a great drive to tie the game for Michael Penix. I I probably would have gone for 2 there if I was Atlanta. I know there's a lot of time left still, but I mean, I don't really trust overtime, and you see why Atlanta didn't get the ball back in overtime. But in terms of the tackle leaders now, Quan Martin had 8, Michael Davis had 6, same with Bobby Wagner, Jeremy Chin had 5, who led the way. 2 sacks on Michael Penix in this one. One of them went to Dorrance Armstrong, one of them went to Dante Fowler. We got to talk about this roughing the passer call on Dante Fowler. I'll just say, hate the rule, don't hate the call there. I think it was the correct call based on what the rule is. You cannot hit the quarterback up in the face mask helmet area, and that is exactly what Dante Fowler did. So, based on what the rule is, I would say yes, that is a roughing call. But I mean, you can argue against the rule, and if the rule is not right, then the refs made the right call there. It's just the rule, not exactly sure. There should be more context with it, especially when edge rushers are hitting that head and neck area on quarterbacks. So that is my thoughts on the roughing call. Um, we'll look at this Atlanta run game. 13 carries for Bijan Robinson in that first half, 4 the rest of the way. 4. Now, he lost a lot of yards on the Wildcat snap over his head late in the game, which really was just a dagger for Atlanta. Now they ended up scoring anyways, but that made it a lot harder for them. 17 carries for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns for Bijan Robinson, who is turning into one of the best young backs in the National Football League. May not be the best yet because of the guy in Philadelphia, but eventually he will be. Bijan has been incredible for Atlanta this season and was incredible for them in this first half, running all over this Washington defensive lines, pardon me. And that has been kind of a weakness that I was hoping once I got back from my trip, the Washington defensive run defense would be fine, but not necessarily. Washington got Jonathan Allen back. And now for the fans that are blaming Jonathan Allen not doing anything, this team was one of the worst run defenses anyways when he was playing before his injury. And then they stayed one of the worst run defenses after his injury. What do you expect to happen when he comes back? Like, maybe it's just a fresh face. I know he's not playing up to his contract number. That's a different story. But blaming him for having a bad run defense in this one is, I mean, not true. Not true, because the run defense has been bad the entire season. When he played at the beginning, even after his injury, and now he's back and still bad. Like, nothing changes. You shouldn't be surprised because of course, him and Payne have not been playing up to the numbers on the contract. They have combined, I believe, have a $40+ million cap hit next year. So we'll see if both of them are on the team in 25. But I mean, that's what you expect. I mean, this run defense has been bad all season. That's been Washington's Achilles heel, and what could definitely haunt them. I'll go into who I want Washington to play in the playoffs later on in this episode. But I mean, it could definitely be very bad, depending on who you play in the playoffs in that first round. So, that is the Washington defense. They stepped up in that second half, only allowing 7 points to the Atlanta Falcons on that final drive in the second half. But one last thing on this side of the ball, Raheem Morris's clock management, it was bad. It was very bad. I was tuned more into the end of the game, but I heard it was bad as well before the end of the first half with his clock management. But the guy does not use his timeouts. I'll have to look back, but I wonder how many timeouts Atlanta did not use the entire game. Because in that first half, there was, I believe, 1 or 2 that they didn't use at all, even though they had the ball with a chance to score more points or score potentially a touchdown. They scored a field goal, but they potentially scored a touchdown before the end of the half. But for Raheem Morris, who is a head coach, I know he's a first-year head coach, but this guy is experienced. He should know better than the clock management in this one, which really costs Atlanta this season, because now they're going to need a Tampa Bay loss next week and a win to win the NFC South. But this clock management really cost them their season. And for a head coach who does not call plays, offense or defense, and is kind of one of those CEO head coaches, you gotta be better than that. Like Zach Robinson in his year the offensive coordinator for Atlanta telling him, "Hey, Raheem, call a timeout here," because Zach is probably focused on calling a play, but like he sees the clock is running down as well. So not exactly sure what Atlanta was doing in this one, but it was not good. Not good on the clock management side of things. Let's wrap this up. The Washington Commanders are in the playoffs, like I mentioned at the top of the episode, for the first time since 2020. It was a massive, massive win for the Commanders, who laid a dud in that first half. Down 17-7. Looked like potentially this was going to be another just disappointing game in Sunday Night Football with a flex Sunday Night Football game at the end of the season with playoff implications on the line. But you got 5, you got a chance, and that is exactly what happened. Jayden Daniels took over, and the Washington Commanders pull out a victory against the Falcons. The Commanders will be going to the playoffs for the first time since winning the division in 2020. I believe they made it in 2017 and then in 2012 as well. So Commanders here are the playoff scenarios for the Washington Commanders in terms of seeding. The Washington can lock up a 6 seed with a win against Dallas, the 6 seed. No matter what, Washington, with the Eagles winning the division as well this week, Washington is going to be traveling on the road the first week, and most likely will be traveling the second week as well. I think they will be traveling the second week as well, based on who they might play, based on the other seeds in this one. So Washington can lock up a 6 seed with a win against Dallas, a loss next week against Dallas, and a Packers victory against the Chicago Bears, and Washington would be the 7th seed. So most likely, Washington will get the 6th seed. And going off of these 6 and 7 seed, if Washington were to get the 7 seed, which would again mean a loss to Dallas next week and a Packers victory, the 7 seed would most likely be playing against the Philadelphia Eagles in the bank, Lincoln Financial Field, in the wild card round. It would be pretty big. It'd be pretty big in that one. And then a rematch of the last 2 games. Eagles taking the first one, Washington taking the second one, but without Jalen Hurts. So there's an asterisk next to it. What would happen in the third? I would not want to face the Eagles, especially with how this run defense is playing most recently. Going up against a guy like Saquon Barkley will not be fun. Will not be fun. The 6th seed, if Washington ends up getting the 6th seed, which a win or a Packers loss, Washington will get the 6th seed. Most likely will play against the Los Angeles Rams in LA. That would be my favorable matchup, but it could be against the Buccaneers, who are red hot right now. One of the best offenses in the National Football League, putting up 40 plus again this week, I believe. The Bucs, with Baker Mayfield looking to potentially make win a playoff game for sure, but potentially make a run in the playoffs. I would probably pick the Rams right now, who currently are 15th in rushing efficiency, which is the lowest out of all 3 of those teams. But these are all 3 good teams. All 3 of them are good teams. You either have to go against the Eagles team with Saquon Barkley, a Rams team with Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford in the playoffs, or a Buccaneers team who is red hot right now and the offense can put up 40 plus points. If Marshawn Lattimore's not able to go in that one, it could be bad. It could be bad very quickly. So that is kind of where things stand for the Washington Commanders in terms of their playoff race or playoff seeding and all of that, because they're already in the playoffs. But yeah, that'll wrap things up in this one. That'll do it. That'll do it for this one. This episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. The next episode will be out on Friday, which will be the preview for the game against the Dallas Cowboys. It's good to be back. I sound a little congested, but it's good to be back in the DMV area and seeing the excitement around this team. It is fun to see Washington in the playoffs again, and a team that actually has a winning record, and for the first time in my life has an 11-win season. So that'll do it for this week's episode of Keeping Up with Commanders. See you guys in the next one. Peace.